Hello, I'm Doug Peckinpah, Director of Content Strategy at BNP Media and leader of the Prepared Foods editorial team. And today I'm joined by Randi Kronthal-Sacco, Senior Scholar at NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business and Adjunct Professor, leading research in areas of marketing and brands, including the Sustainable Market Share Index, which is really the crux of our conversation today. We're also joined by Lauren Hazenfield, Principal of CPG Industry Advisory and Thought Leadership at Circana, who is a partner in this research. Thanks for joining us today, Randi and Lauren.
Our pleasure.
Great to be here.
The American consumer mindset when it comes to sustainability is an ever-evolving situation. It's always present in food and beverage production and in our overall society. It's just something that's part of what we think about when we're considering how we run the business of food and beverage these days, and CPGs in general. Sustainability has the potential to influence every area of food and beverage, from ingredient sourcing to processing and packaging, transportation, distribution, even beyond the point of sale when you think about the end of life for packaging. Every step along the way presents its own challenges and opportunities for product differentiation in a crowded, competitive CPG marketplace. NYU and Circana recently updated the Sustainable Market Share Index, along with a new associated research report entitled Sustainability in the U.S., CPG Inside the Consumer Mindset. Now in its seventh year, this annual report offers an analysis of the latest national purchasing data for consumer products marketed as sustainable. The latest study reveals that sustainability marketed products have reached 25.4% of CPG dollar share in the United States, which is pretty amazing. And that's up 1.6 percentage points over the prior year, so showing growth. Randi, can you talk a little bit more about the current sustainable market share and the latest findings of the survey?
Sure. So we came into this year with curiosity, given the geopolitical changes and focus on, or lack thereof, on sustainability from government and potentially industry. And we're delighted to see that sustainable products not only maintain share, but in fact grew share from the prior year, up, as you said, 1.6 percentage points. If you look at our 5-year CAGR of sustainable products, that's 10.9%. So year-on-year performance of on average 10.9%. And we compare that to brands or aggregate brands of products that don't talk about their sustainability attributes on pack, which is far below the market at 2.2%. Which suggests that sustainable products are growing 4.9 times faster than conventionally marketed products. So clearly the consumers are voting with their pocketbooks, showing that sustainable products are really driving performance for and interest by consumers.
Yeah, the results, in the U.S. and in the European Union, I'm sure are a little bit different. Can you talk just briefly about some of the differences in what you're seeing in the U.S. versus the EU?
Yes. So last year, and we will be updating it again this year, we started to look at Europe. We all had opined that European share would be higher than that of the U.S. because regulations are in place and actually getting more stringent this year to encourage companies to produce sustainably. There is a belief that consumers do care a bit more about sustainability in Europe. And thirdly, there is a price differential, which I'll talk about in a second, to encourage sustainable purchases. And in fact, that what was the opining was correct. Sustainable share in Europe is higher than it is in the U.S. Germany shares 42% of the market, and UK, which is legacy EU, is 32%. So what we found, the way I like to think about it is 1 out of every 2 products purchased in Germany is a sustainably marketed product, 1 out of every 3 in the UK, and just over 1 out of every 4 in the US, albeit growing in all 3 markets, US lagging a bit.
That's fascinating, especially that high number in Germany. It's really interesting, and be interested to follow that a little bit more in the coming years. Lauren, this is impacting our industry, obviously. And can you talk a little bit about growth across different company sizes and private label and how they're approaching sustainability?
Yeah, so one of the more encouraging findings from this year's analysis was that we were able to look at sustainable market share across different company sizes. And what we found is that growth is really widespread from your largest companies to your mid-size to your smallest companies. Sustainable products are gaining share across the board. That said, smaller companies are still further ahead with nearly half of their sales coming from sustainable products. But what's important is that we're seeing even the largest companies really leaning in as well. So brands are continuing to invest across the board, and consumers, as we'll talk about in a bit, consumers are responding, consumers are purchasing. You also mentioned private label. I think that's a huge thing to mention. Store brands now represent 25% of all CPG sales. So a big part of the market. And with that, retailers have a role to play in advancing sustainability through their own products. And we are seeing that in our research as well. So the Sustainable Market Share Index doesn't directly look at private label just due to visibility into UPC data. But from other research, we see clearly that retailers are leaning in. They're making public commitments to removing certain ingredients. They are enhancing sustainable sourcing, and some even launching new brands that are focused on clean products, sustainable products, better for you products. So I think all of this highlights both the success that private brands have so far and also the opportunity that they can play in the sustainability conversation.
Well, can I piggyback on that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
As someone who comes out of industry prior to joining academia, we always thought of brands as the innovators and private label as the followers. In fact, in sustainability in many categories, the private label is leading. And so it's a big opportunity for brands to come in.
Yeah, that's a great point. When we start seeing kind of the innovation side of things happening at private label, that kind of turns us upside down a little bit, and it's refreshing. It's nice to see these different avenues toward innovation and market change. These findings suggest that more growth for sustainability is on the horizon. What gives you confidence that sustainability remains a growth opportunity for CPG? When we look at consumer attitudes and the growing importance of sustainability in consumer decisions, Lauren, where is your encouragement from the consumer perspective?
Yeah, a lot of things to mention here, but I think it all comes down to all of our signals that we're tracking head in the same direction. And what I mean by that is Randi mentioned the market data. The market data shows sustainability is growing in share. When we talk to consumers, it's showing the same thing. Consumers themselves are telling us that more than before, they look to sustainable features in the products that they're purchasing. So one statistic really stood out this year in that 85% of consumers agree that it's important that brands practice sustainability. But what's most compelling about that is that number is up significantly versus 2 years ago. So 5 percentage point growth versus 2024. We've asked very similar questions around the influence that sustainability has on purchase decisions. Same findings, and that is up versus prior years. So really highlights that both attitudes and behaviors, they're heading in the same direction. The other thing I could mention here is the generational differences. And if we think about our future consumer, so Gen Z, millennials, compared to older generations, they're much more likely to tell us that sustainability matters in their purchase decisions, and they're more likely to actively seek out products that speak to those sustainable criterias. And even most importantly, it's not just something that they're saying, but they're actually doing it. When we look at the purchasing data, Gen Z, millennials, they're buying more sustainable products as well.
Every opportunity often comes with its own set of challenges. Otherwise everybody would be doing it. And so, when we look at some of the, avenues towards sustainability that we're seeing in the industry, what are some of the biggest challenges that are preventing sustainability from translating to even stronger sales growth? Randi, do you have any perspectives on that?
Yeah, I would bring up two. One, with the political situation that we're facing, there is a green hushing, a silencing of marketing of brand sustainable benefits. When I first started, I heard a lot about a say-do gap, difference between what people say they're going to do and what they're actually doing. I would say that we have a different say-do gap now, which is consumers are buying, but brands are not saying as much. So many cases, they have sustainable supply chains, and for a variety of reasons, they're not telling the consumers, but consumers are interested, and it's a lost opportunity. That does not, and I think that is one of the contributing factors to the growth in Europe relative to the US, is that there is far more communication of sustainable benefits. Same companies, same brands, they're telling consumers in Europe and not necessarily telling them here. The second piece, which is a challenge, is the pricing differential. So the last time we looked at pricing, we saw a 27% delta between sustainable products and conventionally marketed products, meaning for 27% premium on aggregate. That is basically zero in Europe. So it is a very easy decision for consumers in Europe, since the price differential is non-existent. The 27% is actually down from a high several years ago. My guess is it's going to come back up, and we're looking at that for this year. But I know that the raw materials are not 27% higher. So this is just something that companies are doing to increase the enterprise bottom line, but does stymie the growth.
Lauren, when we think about some of the economic pressures related to sustainability, I would think that, the market has some growth, or maybe some, broader understanding to grasp here. I mean, the differences that Randi just noted between, the EU and the US are surprising to me, that sustainability has been so ingrained into the culture in some countries overseas that it's just part of the cost of doing business. Is that the case in the United States? What are some of the economic pressures that we're facing here?
Yeah, so I mean, you said it. The consumers are facing compounding affordability pressures today. We are seeing sales growth slowing, volume is tight, especially in the last couple of months. So with that, consumers have to be very intentional, very selective with their choices. But at the same time, what is very clear in our data is that people are still willing to spend for premiums on what matters to them, what gives them the outcomes or the need, what fits their need states. And so it may feel counterintuitive, as people are being more selective, they're still willing to pay premiums for certain brands. They're willing to pay premiums for health, connection, relevance, and part of that is sustainability. And so it's great to see that despite tighter wallets, people are willing to put their money into sustainable products. But brands still need to showcase the value of sustainability. And so it's important, especially in today's environment, to showcase the impact your products are having clearly, make it understandable, make it direct, make it tangible to them, so that they're willing to pay for these products that clearly still hold value to them.
And to piggyback on that, there is a clear connection between health and sustainability, which Lauren has seen in her data, and the MAHA agenda is contributing to more focus on health and sustainability, and should continue to drive purchases.
When we think about, how manufacturers, product developers can communicate the benefits, the value proposition, and really claims, like what these companies are doing to improve the sustainability of the product that you have in hand as you're trying to decide if you're going to drop it into your shopping basket or not. What can food and beverage manufacturers do to focus on their communication strategies?
Yeah, we found. Oh, sorry, Lauren.
I was just going to add on to your mention of health, because I do think that's needed. People are willing to spend more when it comes to their health. And so our recommendation for a lot of brands and retailers is don't treat sustainability and health as separate stories, because highlighting your product as it's healthier because it's sustainably made, that enhances willingness to pay. People don't compromise to get one or the other. They're getting both. And those claims are really strong in the marketplace.
And to piggyback and also elaborate on the answer, we know from our data that consumers expect the packaging itself to communicate the claim so that they can make decisions at point of sale. We also know that consumers are egocentric, and there is a marketing term with them, what's in it for me. And that makes sense and is compelling for sustainability as well. So the claims that do the best have to do with themselves, the personal, my health, absence of toxic ingredients, harmful to human health, my wealth, help them save money, lower energy, etc. And then my personal world, things that are around me, my children, my pets. Animal cruelty is a big claim, things that make consumers think about themselves and what's in it for them really drives benefit to them.
Yeah, really making that personal connection is just so important. I think we see that consumer trait travel across generations, where people want to feel a connection to how they're spending their food dollars, and that level of meaningfulness that's built into that transaction really helps build on consumer loyalty through the years. So a lot of power there, and it seems like there's a lot of momentum behind sustainability. Thank you so much for joining us today, Randi and Lauren, and for sharing these great insights.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.